Hi guys, and welcome back to my Texas Chainsaw Massacre series movie reviews, and today we'll be looking at the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the beginning.
Everybody's a suspect!
Coming to get you, Bobber.
Wolfman's got Nards!
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Beginning is a 2006 horror movie directed by Jonathan Liebsman, and it stars Jordana Brewster, Matt Bomer and Deora Baird. As always guys, as this is old, this is going to be a spoiler review. Before being sent to serve in Vietnam, two brothers and their girlfriends take one last road trip, but when they get into an accident, a terrifying experience will take them to a secluded house of horrors with a chainsaw wielding killer. This is of course a prequel to the remake that we got 3 years earlier, and I don't favour prequels over sequels all the time, but I think if they've already told a story for a movie and there's nowhere to move forward with it, then I think a prequel might be a good idea. Albeit I think that they still had a sequel for the 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I probably would have preferred a sequel before a prequel. However, we got a prequel and that's something that we have to accept. I did mention before that we don't need to see a full backstory for these serial killers. I mentioned before about Michael Myers and his backstory with the Rob Zombie remake. I think that was too much and too obsessive, or too excessive I should say. But with Leatherface, he's not a mystery. I think knowing more about Leatherface doesn't hurt, and in fact I think it improves the quality of the character. It starts off in August 1939 when Leatherface was just born, and at the beginning of this movie we find out that he wasn't part of the Hewitt family, he wasn't related to the Hewitt family, he wasn't stolen either. However, his body, or the baby, was found in a bin by the grandma, so she's took him away as her own. Another nice touch for the backstory is we don't get involved in too much of his childhood. For the first couple of minutes of the opening credit scene, we see parts of his childhood where he gets bullied because he's deformed, and I think that's all we really need to know about the childhood Leatherface, because obviously it cuts to 1969 when he's an adult. When we do cut to July 1969, he's working for the very man who threw him in a bin 30 years earlier, so it comes full circle, working for the person who thought you were dead. But the factory that Leatherface works in, or Thomas I should say, the factory that Thomas works in is shutting down, they're losing business, and I think over the 30 years he was doing this kept him, maybe not sane, but it kept him from killing people because he was killing animals instead and cutting them up. But I think after 30 years he would miss that, and then begins the terror of Leatherface. The story with this one is quite similar in terms of the victims. They're travelling across the country, only this time there's two brothers and the two girlfriends. The two brothers are going to serve in Vietnam. However, one of the brothers doesn't want to go, and he doesn't want to tell his other brother, his older brother, because he looks up to him, and there's a fight that breaks out between those two, and that's a kind of, it's a good dynamic for the victims in this film because they've got their own demons to deal with and their own problems outside the Hewitt family. We find out that there's only one sheriff in this town, and this sheriff is actually moving to Michigan, and this is where this sheriff's name's Hoyt as well. So we also find out that Hoyt's name wasn't actually Hoyt, we knew that anyway, but we find out his name's Charlie in this one, played by R. Lee Ermey. So it's got a bit of a backstory with him as well, finding out how he became the fake sheriff. We get another fantastic intro to R. Lee Ermey's character as well.
Shit, I just killed the whole fucking sheriff's department.
I mentioned that there was no sign of any cannibalism in the remake, and maybe fans didn't like that because they were a cannibalistic family. I think they fixed that in this one because they did resort to cannibalism in this one. Again, Sheriff Hoyt stole the show. He was absolutely petrifying in this. Anytime he was speaking to the victims in this film, I just felt petrified for them, and also you can tell in their faces that something wasn't right. Was he actually a sheriff? I don't think they realised that he wasn't, but I think they thought there was something wrong with this guy. They didn't go into this backstory too much, but they did mention, or Hoyt did mention, that he had to resort to cannibalism way back in 1952 when he was in the war, when he had to eat people. So maybe that's how his cannibalistic tendencies began.
Well, about once a week, some poor soul was chosen.
Classic Hoyt.
It's a good thing you didn't go to Vietnam. Something like this might happen.
And here we have another traditional butt scene. There's been some truly terrifying scenes in the remake and the prequel, but one of the most terrifying scenes and most heartbreaking scenes was when Chrissy had to listen to Eric die and the manner that he was killed as well. It was just truly horrifying. Something else that was missing from the remake was the classic dinner scene from the original movie. Again, maybe fans didn't like the fact that it didn't have the classic dinner scene in it, but they had the dinner scene in this movie. It's almost like this movie was fixing or adding things in to this little companion piece that the 2003 remake was missing. We also got the window smash scene as well. I was surprised, yet I wasn't surprised about the end of this film. Nobody survived. I wasn't surprised because this was a prequel, so if anyone survived this movie or anyone survived this scenario, then they could have went and told someone what happened, and then the Hewitts wouldn't be doing what they're doing a few years later. So it made sense that nobody survived. But I was also surprised as well because of the manner that everybody died. Always check the back seat of your car.
Someone's in the back seat!
Something so interesting and unique about this film as well was the narration was at the end of the movie for the very first time. That was great. Also, they did mention in that narration that they killed 33 people between 1969 and 1973. So that set up a perfect I don't know, you could call it a trilogy or more sequels to the prequel, because they killed 33 people. Not 33 people didn't die in the prequel, so for the body count that was left after that, you could have made a couple more movies that led up to the sequel in 2003. That obviously didn't happen, and we obviously didn't get a sequel to the remake either. It was just a complete missed opportunity. I think this was also the first movie in the franchise that had a direct link to another movie in the franchise. I know that parts 1 and 2 were sort of a sequel to each other, but it had a completely different feel to it. Whereas the prequel and the remake, they looked the same, they felt the same, they almost looked like they were filmed back to back as well, but they were filmed 3 years apart. That's how perfect these two go together. Some people would say they were maybe giving us too many answers to questions that we didn't even have in the first place. For example, how did Hoyt become Sheriff Hoyt? How did he lose his teeth? How did Monty lose his legs and he's in a wheelchair in the 2003 remake? All these things to me were quite fun to understand how they came to be, but some people would think that's just a jigsaw puzzle that we didn't really need to know. But for me personally, I thought that was quite fun. It also made me think as well that although Monty had legs in the 2006 prequel, I also had that notion in my head, is he about to lose his legs here? Is he going to lose his legs here? Again, that was really fun. Just like the remake, I think this was a stellar cast. Obviously most of the bad guys were back and they were all just as amazing, if not even better in this one than they were in the remake. But again, the victims in this one, I got behind them all. I felt for them all in this one as well. That's something that these movies, the remake and the prequel, had over the original series, because they gave us more depth to the characters. Whether we wanted to like them or not, we got invested in the characters, so that when they did die, or if they died, we'd feel sorry for them, and we just wanted the Hewitt family to pay for what they were doing. Leatherface again was incredible in this. He was very scary in the 2003 remake, and this one I think it maybe tips it a little bit, because he was more menacing in this one. He was more brutal in this one as well. Obviously that doesn't really tie into why he's getting less brutal, but I just felt like he was a more darker figure in this one. Obviously he's supposed to be younger in this one. He's only about 30 years old in this one, so he's probably faster, more powerful as well, and he looked it. The practical effects in this were on point again. The practical effects in the remake were great, and they were just as good in this one. I mentioned earlier about the dinner scene and things that were missing from the remake that they brought into this one, and I overall felt like this was a companion piece to the remake. If you watch this, I've not done this yet, but it would be quite interesting to do. If you watch the prequel first and then watch the remake back to back, it would be seamless. It would be absolutely brilliant, because I watched both of them back to back anyway, but I watched the remake first, and because they look so similar, they sound so similar, everything about it was just so similar. More characters came back as well, which was interesting. I just felt like it was just one big companion piece to the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I know that sometimes I try and think of some negatives for a film because I have to do that, but I genuinely can't find any negatives. That's not to say this is a perfect movie, because it's not. It's got a few little flaws, not enough to tell you about, but I think if I had to nitpick, and I'm contradicting myself, if I had to nitpick, it would be the fact that we had a good understanding or a good idea that nobody was going to survive in this movie because of what we saw in the sequel. So that would be my only negative if I had to choose one. So have you guys seen the prequel to the remake? I know that there are some people out there that don't like this movie, and I think it's got 5.8 on IMDb, so I know that it's not liked by everyone, but let me know your thoughts down below. As always guys, thanks a lot for watching, thanks for subscribing, I'll see you soon, bye bye.